To Good Tech, an ongoing discussion around ethics and technology. I'm Elizabeth Perry with Idka. First and foremost, we just want to hope you're staying safe and healthy wherever you are in the world. If you're a health professional or someone still out there working, we want to thank you for all you do. As a reminder, this show is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel or on ubngo.com/goodtech and on any podcast channel you choose. If you're tuning in live today and have any questions or comments, you can dial the number on your screen and we'll do our best to get you in on the conversation. We always appreciate hearing from you, so don't hesitate to leave any feedback in the comment section if you're on YouTube. So the world is in crisis. Everyone knows this. We're all feeling it in some way. We're talking about it. We have differing perspectives and political viewpoints and even differing interpretations and notions of the facts. As we discussed on an earlier show with Jane Gideon, we're lacking data to help us make informed decisions. In the span of about a month, our world has changed before our eyes. And, when do we get through that? When we do get through this, when the lockdown is over, the world will be a different place. For those of us who are struggling to stay afloat during this global lockdown, how can we rethink what we're doing both personally and professionally? How do we prepare for what's next? As leaders to whom people are looking for guidance, what are we doing to help others to remain calm and avoid panic? Here to help shed some light on offer his unique perspective on managing during crisis and to help keep dialogue open is one of those leaders. It's my pleasure to welcome journalist, marketing and communications expert, and entrepreneur Mitch Ratcliffe.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for having me, and I hope everybody is safe as well.
Yeah, so this is big. We're all, it's big. We're all talking about this. And but first, I want to know, what's the general mood where you are? You're on the West Coast of the U.S.
We're in Washington State, which was the original hotspot in the United States, and I would say we actually are feeling a sense of optimism. Washington actually sent ventilators to New York and to other states the other day because we will not need them based on the projections we have. So the lockdown is working, and we're feeling good about it.
Right. Now this is. You had the virus, you told me.
Yeah. My whole family has had it. It was
and I think people. Sorry if I'm. I don't know if there's an echo, but I'm sorry if I'm jumping on your words. Okay. So tell us a little bit about what that's like, because I think people want to hear from the front lines. What's it like dealing with actually going through this?
It's a nasty flu. If you're not seriously ill, it's a nasty flu. And it's probably the most enervating, no energy, just a lack of will to even press yourself to get out of bed, kind of 10-day fever and body ache, racking joint pain kind of illness. There's 4 members of my household. 2 of us had respiratory issues, but not serious respiratory issues. That was a very persistent cough. But it also passed. After 14, 15 days, I had a day where I woke up and I thought, geez, I actually feel better. And coming out of the illness was almost a revelation. It just felt like it was going to go on forever, but it ended, and we're going to come back. And I actually have a stronger sense of that now that I've had COVID.
Mm-hmm. So what's your feeling about immunity? And I don't want to focus too much on this, but I think everybody's curious. I mean,
I have no idea. It certainly feels like I have the sense, like I would with the flu or a cold, that I will not get it again. But then who knows? This is a fast mutating virus as well, and it could come back in 18 months in a slightly different form and infect me and my family again.
Yeah. Well, I hope it stays away. And so let's talk about this COVID-19 crisis. It's likely, some people are calling it the worst global disaster the vast majority of us have ever experienced.
Well,
What do
it's
you think about
certainly,
that? Why?
yeah, it is certainly, it's global in a way that we have never been global before. We have isolated disasters, the Fukushima meltdown or the Loma Prieta quake in San Francisco, where I was living at the time, and I also lived through Mount St. Helens under the ash cloud. Those were short-term and highly localized experiences that, although the rest of the world knew about it because of media, we went through alone. Right now, we have a sense we're going through this together as a planet. And that's because of the propagation of transportation technology and media, with the ability both to watch our leaders, which would be what we would have expected 30 or 40 years ago, and to hear millions of individual stories through the web about the impact on families, on communities. A lot of the coverage of this is not even of people with COVID, but of cities that are simply shut down. 300 years ago, 200 years ago, you would have heard about a plague somewhere else. It might migrate towards you. In fact, a great movie to watch right now is The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman. It's set in Sweden during the plague, the bubonic plague. And there's a real sense that somewhere out there is the plague coming towards those characters. That's what it would have been like 200 or 300 years ago. Now it's almost instantaneous by comparison. Yeah. And that's really shocking for all of us. And it has disrupted so many aspects of normal everyday life that we're all feeling it in a way that we've never shared an experience before.
Yeah, it's what frightens me, I guess, or not, maybe not frightens a strong word, but is the fact that it's being politicized to the point where nobody knows what's true anyway, because we don't have all the facts. I mean, I know so many people who say they have it but had not been tested.
Right. Well, that's part of the problem. A lot of us haven't been tested. We couldn't get a test to save our lives, which is a tragic statement, even though it's meant to be a wry comment.
Yeah. But so from a communication standpoint, and I do want to get kind of heavy into the media aspect of things. Sure. What we're hearing is now being either one side or the other. So now, my Republican friends, a lot of them are saying, oh, this lockdown, we have to get the economy back in shape. And yeah, of course. But then, the sort of leftist point of view, it's being labeled this. The leftist point of view is that, no, we have to stay inside and, stay. What about this politicizing? How dangerous is that?
Oh, I think it's terribly dangerous because it leads to misinformation and an almost religious conviction about that misinformation. I actually think that the politicization is overplayed. The questions being asked of many of the leaders around the world, but particularly Donald Trump, are perfectly fair questions for a free press to ask. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we're seeing the model adopted of many authoritarian cultures where asking a hard question of a leader is not permitted. And you see that in Trump's daily press rally, where he will, admonish someone for asking him a hard question. But they're fair questions, and that's what a free press is meant to do. I think it's unfortunate that we are taking sides because science and epidemiology in particular are clear about how this is going to be eradicated, and it's twofold. One is an extended period of social distancing, which we're all living through now, and the development of a vaccine. And that vaccine is 18 to 24 months away and then has to be distributed to the entire world in order for us to not have to endure this seasonally in the northern and southern hemispheres for years to come. This is going to be like the flu, a flu that kills more people than the flu. And it's going to take a while for us to get back to it isn't even getting back. It's moved forward to a new normal. Let me be real clear about that. We're not talking about going backwards. This is actually an opportunity for society to rethink a lot of things. And in particular, to look past the right-left divisions that we've been hung up on for the last 30 or 40 years, and begin to think about what a digitally deeply connected society that's based on egalitarian opportunity could look like. And that's something that is, it's a really opportune time to discuss those things, because so much about what we do doesn't work right now.
Yeah. I mean, so let's get into responsibilities right now of, let's start with, I mean, we're going to touch on leadership and all that. I know a lot of us are questioning our leadership. I mean, our leaders,
Yeah.
From all sides of it, like the health leaders in healthcare, the leaders in, but what about the media? So someone made a comment to me just today that because media is now a business, and it has been a business for a long time, it's based upon how entertaining it is. Yeah. It's ratings, it's this, that, whatever. What can we expect or ask as far as responsibility for the media in terms of reporting? Because what we're seeing on both sides, I think, is a lot of opinion and not much based on fact checking.
Well, I think there's a lot of fact checking going on. The interpretation of facts is always problematic and confusing. And so you'll see cherry picking of facts on both sides of this debate. Our responsibility as citizens, first and foremost, is to be informed and involved and to express ourselves. The press, particularly sitting in the press room at the White House or outside number 10 in London or anywhere in the world, are our representatives who get to ask questions on our behalf. And unfortunately, a lot of the media has shifted from a journalistic perspective to an entertainment or ratings-driven perspective. If you read carefully on Fox News, it's described as not a journalistic organization, but an information and entertainment service. They don't warrant what they're saying. On the other hand, journalistic organizations like CBS are dying because they do not have the capacity to reach as many people as Fox does. And I would love to see more Edward R. Murrow and a lot less Tucker Carlson in our national debate, but we're not going to see that because we've shifted our journalistic systems to a business. And I've lived through that. News was a loss leader for the great news organizations, and they knew that they were always pushing back on their sponsors and on power. But now a lot of media considers itself in bed with one or the other side of the debate. And that's become even more pronounced since Citizens United and companies were allowed to begin to express themselves politically with massive amounts of money. So they can deploy money to that as well as to their preferred media outlet, just through the form of advertising, to get more of their message out. All of that adds up to our each being bombarded with a lot more information we have to think critically about, make decisions with regard to, and then speak our own voice. Now, it's hard to do that. We can sign petitions, we can make blog posts, we can do podcasts about what we think is wrong with the world. But when we think in terms of how many people are watching, or, as the president frequently says, my ratings are number one. Well, okay, great. But ratings do not equate to moral or ethical or even political authority. They simply are a way of expressing how many people you've got, whose attention you have, even for just a moment. And this is a long-term problem. We have to think about these problems for years to come. It's not going to be gone like the news cycle is treating it whenever this lockdown ends. It's going to continue for, at least, as I was saying, 18 to 26 or 36 months until we have a widely distributed vaccine. And even then, what have we learned about the way we interact, and how are we going to digest that? And I think the ultimate outcome of this is going to be the digestion of the digital revolution by society. Right now we have a very 1980s infrastructure. That's about when we stopped investing in it here in the United States. That's a media infrastructure which has grown expansively since the dawn of cable television, but it's also a physical infrastructure for work that's oriented around going to an office. We know that a lot of people are no longer going to the office, and we also know that the people who have to be in physical locations to provide services, those who we generally think of as the least contributing in society, the minimum wage workers, are the ones who are absolutely essential to keeping things going locally. And we're going to have to rethink that and their role and what they are required to do in a crisis on behalf of everybody else by possibly paying them more on an hourly basis all the time so that they're ready to step up when these crises emerge.
Yeah. So let's kind of break it down a little bit in terms of what in your opinion are we doing wrong in terms of our communications, and I mean in the media, and what can we do better? How can we do better? Can we do better? Or is it just a broken system?
I think in a lot of ways the media is broken, but because it tries to treat all interaction equally. Entertainment interactions are less important than political or economic or moral or ethical discussions, and we don't have a lot of those because entertainment grabs eyeballs. But we need a more deliberative process, something that when we talked about the promise of the digital world 20 or 30 years ago, we imagined a highly participatory democracy enabled by technology. But what happens is you get clumps of people ally, and then they start into these bubble environments, start creating environments where their views are reinforced. And that closes us off from one another. And it also has driven the emergence of identity politics as the primary driver of political alliances in society. So how would media break that down? It would by presenting more perspectives, by asking more hard questions of all the people involved and all the different positions that are being put out there. And you don't hear that. What you hear is a carefully crafted reinforcement of what the venue, whether it's Fox or CNBC or whatever, believes the worldview should be. And that's a perfectly natural human thing to do. That's why media has always been a business. Somebody came along and said, well, I'm going to create a community through the dissemination of information. And that started off, if you look at the history of newspapers, in coffee houses in a few cities around the world. And essentially the coffee house became the aggregator of information, and then they would publish a newspaper or a journal or whatever that reached the upper tier of society and the lower tier of society. The paper would be passed along from somebody who purchased it to somebody who picked it up and read it, and it was a leveling influence. But with technology, it actually has inverted, so that access to the technology has created a separation between large numbers of people: those who have the most access and can speak and be heard, and most people who can't speak and be heard because they can't break through the ceiling of ratings that makes them significant.
Right. Is it possible though that, I mean, speaking of dialogue and because that's how I see it, mm-hmm. as the positive that I'm seeing in my circles or, my conversations with people, is that a few people are trying to stay open to why is it that, Trump got elected? Why is it that, what is it, the mindset? What are they thinking? What are their worries? What do they care about? What made this happen? Mm-hmm. Because I think it's a real thing. And I think that even though I don't like Trump, sorry, but I do understand that there's a reason he's in office. It wasn't all a mistake. I mean, I think that people actually do believe that he was the best man for the job.
Yeah, and we have to live with the consequences of that. Both the voters who voted for him and those who voted against. That is our obligation as members of a nation. Right. However, what we're hearing right now is that there are parts of many different nations who don't belong. And that is one of the most troubling things to me about what Trump says, is he characterizes large swaths of America as either being treasonous or subversive. And that's very, very concerning. On the other hand, he lies consistently, and we can't trust what he is saying, nor does he have a consistent policy. He's shooting from the hip. And this is not simply to condemn Trump. This is, commentary on Boris Johnson. It's on Xi Jinping. All of these folks have given us misleading guidance. And we're learning that through the internet, that we can find alternative explanations to what we were talking about before. Are they right or wrong? A lot of the times we just glom onto the alternative explanation ideologically without actually thinking through the facts. And that's what our challenge as a citizen is to be able to pick those facts out. And because we don't have an educational system oriented around digital communications, or at least we didn't before the COVID outbreak, we don't have the skills as citizens, the literacy skills necessarily to be as critical as we need to. One of the benefits of this, if we move to a virtual education system that augments physical education as well as virtual workplaces, everybody will have access finally. There won't be a digital divide. Here in Washington State, where we have closed the schools for the remainder of the year, we're imposing a virtual teaching agenda on teachers. My wife is a teacher in a public school, and so she is putting together online classwork for the first time in her career. Fortunately, she's trained in how to do it, but a lot of teachers are not. But that requires, for equity purposes, that they get a computer into the hands of every student that has been sitting in the classroom, and that has not been the case. My wife has 8 to 10 students each year who live in a car. They're not going to have a tablet unless somebody provides them a tablet. And if they have that tablet, if they don't waste all their time watching YouTube videos and music and things like that, they have the option to become an active citizen. And what that looks like, I can't tell you whether we're going to take advantage of it or not, but it does change the way that people access information and gives people a voice who may not have had one before. On the other hand, it can also wash over, it can provide just virulent streams of information that'll wash over all reason and destroy dialogue.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of touching on a positive that's coming out of all of this, and that is, people are being forced to teach digital communication, especially in the elementary schools and or high schools even, that a lot of people aren't set up for these online for online teaching. So we're being forced to make that happen.
And we're also learning that digital desert exists not just as it 20 or 30 years ago we thought existed only in rural areas. It's in urban areas too. I traveled with President Clinton on a digital divide tour, covered him as a journalist in 2000. And we went out to the Navajo country, to the Four Corners region of the United States, where many Native Americans don't have access to any digital communications, or didn't at the time. And that was where the problem was thought to be. But in fact, we know as well in my community that there is a vast swath of children who have no access to the internet and don't even have homes. And now that we can see this all clearly, through digitization in part, we have the opportunity to measure and choose what we want to improve. That's where we need to stop and look at, in what I would call the great pause that we're going through right now, opportunities to change the metrics, because once we start to measure things, we can change them. And that means agreeing on what we're measuring and what it means. And that's the dialogue that we have to go through now.
Yeah, and this is, and I want to go further into this. On Idka, we started a group. It's called "What Now, What's Next," yep. And it's just an effort to open the dialogue between leaders and thought leaders and people that sort of are in this space of communication, etc. And I asked two questions, and I want to sort of get your answer to this because it touches on what we're talking about rethinking. When it's over, and it will be over, where and who do you want to be, and how will you get there? So you already touched on some of the changes, but
so I want to be me, and I want to be authentically me. I wanted to do that before, but that requires that we rethink our relationship to other people as well. And we're being forced to confront that relationship and where it's breaking down because of the interruption from COVID, and also because of the fragile nature of our infrastructure, physical and digital. You can see the slowing down of the internet on any site now because of how much traffic is, how many people are sitting at home streaming mostly.
yeah.
You can see the breakdown in some food supply chains. There's a, you can see the breakdown in the medical system, obviously. We don't have enough of resources like ventilators in some places. We don't, there's this whole thing about the drug, the malaria drug that Trump has been touting. Now, people who have lupus and arthritis who have been taking that drug for those conditions can no longer get it because we actually have a president hyping the drug as a solution to something it's not even proven to address. Okay, his opinion, but not necessarily the right opinion, and we have to keep that in mind. But that's our leader, and we have the obligation as citizens not to disrupt the nation in response to the president. We have to change the president. And that's the question we'll answer in our election, if in fact it happens on time in 2020. But what do I want to be? How do I do that? Well, I've been looking at how I live and how my family lives and where we depend on other people. I've also looked at how we are spending money poorly and started to cut back. Obviously, everybody is doing those things. But why don't we do it deliberatively, such as choosing something we want to change, like our environmental impact on the world? And that's what I do at Earth 911, is write about how sustainability and recycling programs can be used effectively to lower our impact on the world. So I'm looking at how we travel, when we travel. I have not been to the office that I go to now for 5 weeks, and I wonder whether or not I will ever go back to an office other than maybe 1 day a week in order to have that physical contact. So I'm spending less time traveling, but I'm spending more time talking to people. A lot of folks around the world are reporting and participating in Zoom conferences of 10 or 20 people who just get together. I'm doing it with a work group on one of my client companies, where we just sit around in Zoom with drinks for an hour on an afternoon 1 day a week in order to talk and to be human. The shooting the shit that you do in the office virtually, and that's a good use of my time. Likewise, I'm spending an hour a week with my extended family on a Zoom call that I have not done. Most of my family, we barely have talked for 30 years. We were recently brought together by my brother's diagnosis with brain cancer. That was interrupted by COVID. And now we're spending an hour a week together after not having spent probably more than 2 or 3 hours collectively at any one time for 40 years. So we can change a lot of the interaction that we do using technology. We can also stop buying things that are simply wasteful. And unfortunately, what we're seeing as a result of COVID is a rise in the consumption of junk food, for instance, because people are looking at it as comfort food and it's cheap. Maybe we don't need cheap junk food. Maybe the packaging for that junk food is enough of a reason not to buy it in the first place because it can't be recycled efficiently. There are many, many ways in which I can be less impactful on the world while giving back more to the people around me. And that's what I'm rethinking now.
Yeah. And you're so right. I mean, there's just a quality almost, even though we don't see other people, we're sort of in this thing together in a way, and we can all relate to each other on that one level.
And when you see a familiar face and you see somebody smile spontaneously, which we just don't notice when we're physical, when it's novel because of the isolation we're going through right now, it can be transformative. And that's the opportunity we have right now, is to rethink things in a slightly different light. We're not going to abandon our worldview, but we shouldn't be thinking about going back to something. We should be thinking, as humans always have, about how we expand opportunity globally, how we raise people out of poverty, how we create egalitarian access to resources, so that everybody has the opportunity to contribute the most, not to take the most, but to contribute the most.
Yeah, and you mentioned offline projects that you're working on, and I'm interested. We always talk about sustainability with you because that's such a passionate thing you're passionate about. So I want to talk about that. What does that have to do with anything right now?
Everything. We can recast how we live because we no longer are doing everything that we did. It's an opportunity to stop and think. And reflection is the only thing that separates us from the rest of the animals on this planet. We do have the capacity to stop and think. And that is an extraordinarily important and rare opportunity. Sustainability, we basically we put demands on the planet that are roughly 40 to 50% greater than it can carry right now. But that doesn't mean that we have to have less people, or we all have to live less well. It means that we have to think about eliminating the externalities we previously ignored. So companies never counted the cost of the pollution they created, for instance. Companies never factored in the cost of recycling the plastic packaging that allows them to deliver their food or other products in safe ways. But so we could rethink single-use plastic recycling or packaging right now is something we should be rethinking. We can, how many of us are ordering food at home right now? Can we rethink that? Just the takeout packaging is incredibly wasteful. Each of these things is small, but it can add up to massive changes when everybody does it. And you can see this right now in the impact on the environment in China, Italy, and the United States. We've shut down, and the air is cleaner than it has been in decades. In fact, Los Angeles right now, you can go look and you can see across the valley. It's incredible. Dolphins showed up in Venice.
And they're in Barcelona too.
Right. And it's because we stopped polluting. We stopped the shipping as much as we did. And it opened these passages that they ignored because they were dirty and noisy. Okay, so does that mean we keep shipping off forever? No, not necessarily, but maybe we rethink how we do it, because you can see everything changed, and it changed in weeks, not years. We could turn a lot of things around. If we reduce the amount of CO2 emissions we emit today, we can forego extreme weather in the future that is going to cost something on the order of $300 to $600 billion a year just in the United States for interruptions like what we're going through right now with COVID, except it might be extreme weather in the Southwest. It could be extreme weather in the Southeast, tornadoes and hurricanes. It could be fires, in California. All this stuff is going to be more and more prevalent as the world warms. So why don't we reduce that? We have the mechanism, cut CO2 emissions, but now's an opportunity to stop and think, well, they're down now, let's keep them down.
Now, talk to me a little bit more about specifically what you guys are doing at Earth 911.
Well, so we are a 30-year-old recycling database. We have the largest database of recycling programs in the United States. In addition, we publish sustainable living editorial content every day, 2 or 3 articles about how to be less impactful on the planet. And that's a the beginning of a transition that we're going through right now. We just introduced earlier this week, product-specific recycling information. We have our first brand partner doing that is Organic Girl. They make salad dressing and salads. You can come to our site or use a URL that'll be on their packaging, earth911.info whack organic girl, all one word. And you can see our first example of a product-specific recycling guide. It isn't, oh, this might be made of this plastic or that. It's this product packaging is made of this plastic and needs to be recycled this way. We provide the steps for if it goes in curbside or you have to take it to a transfer station. And in one case with Organic Girl, they have a mail-in recycling program for their plastic bags. So you actually can get your stuff taken care of. And that's the first step, because if consumers don't prepare and recycle materials, nothing else happens efficiently in this entire system. American recycling systems produce about 24% contaminated recycling or recycled materials, which means that they're not really useful. Better preparation will lower that number to something more like what it is in other countries. For instance, China recycles far more aluminum and plastic than we do, because they have, through a centralized system, got people to act in a consistent way. Because we have a different political system, we have to get people to choose to act in a consistent way. And we try to provide that information, and brands are incredibly interested in making sure that their products and the packaging that's delivered in can be recycled, because they need those materials. A really good example of this is PLA, it's bioplastics. And you'll see a lot of compostable plastic now used as packaging, like the clamshell packaging you might buy a salad in. It was introduced in the hopes of letting this stuff break down in the environment. But what the manufacturers of those things are realizing is the resin that they use to make that is so valuable, they would prefer to get it back instead of have to buy more virgin resin. And that means more efficiency in the system, less electricity used to make the plastic in the first place. You save water, you save emissions, you save electricity, but there has to be a simple way to do it. So we're focused on creating guides for each product that you use. You might only refer to this 2 or 3 times before you have it in your head, but that's the step every one of us needs to take in order to make the recycling system work more effectively. So our focus is to help people recycle. Let's get rid of landfills. Let's turn the vast mind of information or of materials that we've thrown away into the future products and services that we want to buy and to sell.
Yeah, and I think this still, thank you. Sounds like an amazing effort, and I just, I'm hoping that one of the takeaways from this crisis that we're in is a way for people to wake up to what's important and to simplify and to make things, because it's not that hard. I mean, we're being forced to do it, but it's really not that hard. It is hard if you're living in a tiny little apartment and you can't go outside, because of course, but to simplify.
Well, and choose what we simplify and what we complexify, because each of us has the things we want to have complex solutions to. On the other hand, we don't have to have everything be complex and wasteful. So simplification means less wasteful. It also means counting everything that we've ignored for a long time, counting the environmental impacts of packaging, counting the environmental impacts of the raw materials that are extracted to make new gasoline and new cell phones.
So, let's talk about companies, and because I know you're also very much involved in communications for companies and helping companies to get the proper messages out and et cetera. And I think that, what are some ways that companies now can stay relevant? Because we're all suffering from this thing. Business is suffering, economies are suffering, but there are ways we can reinvent ourselves.
Sure.
And so what are some of the examples that you know of that where people are or companies are reinventing themselves or staying relevant, I guess I should say?
Well, a lot of companies. So I am also a partner in Metaforce, which is a marketing agency, metaforce.co, if you're interested in learning more, folks. We work with companies in part on branding and in part on sustainability marketing efforts, essentially being as transparent as possible about what they're doing so that consumers can understand the consequences of the decisions they make.
Right.
And we're seeing a lot of companies generally moving towards understanding the value of sustainability. Like I was saying, the bioplastic packaging companies are realizing they actually need to recycle the stuff, not just have it go into compost. Aluminum companies are seeking to increase the percentage of recycled materials in each package or can that they make. There are a lot of reasons to do that. It saves them money. It lightens their impact on the environment. It makes their employees proud of what they do too, that they're doing more for people to create prosperity while having a lower impact on the planet. So they're beginning to embrace this, or we're beginning to embrace this prior to the COVID outbreak. Now that the COVID outbreak is underway, you are seeing companies do two things. One is opportunistic. Hey, we're still here. We're doing things for. I've received so many emails from companies I brushed against sometime 20, 30 years ago. Mitch, we're still here, and COVID is so relevant, and now we're relevant again.
Yeah.
Well, okay, thank you. No. On the other hand, there are companies like Zoom, we're recording on Zoom, that are providing free services for people all over the world. They have 200 million users all of a sudden because of the increase in video conferencing. They're giving that away at their basic free level. That's marketing. On the other hand, it is a public service that they are providing as a loss leader to gain paying customers who want a better experience. That may be a good way to go. HBO is doing the same thing. They're giving away free programming. Okay, well, am I any better because I have HBO? No, not with regard to COVID, but I am more entertained. That may or may not be a really true valuable public service. And then there are companies who are giving ventilators to the federal government. There are companies that are contributing hundreds of millions of dollars through the UN Foundation for COVID recovery efforts around the world. That might be providing personal protective equipment or ventilators, or it could be programs to support small business or at-risk communities during this crisis. And all of that is great and important spending on their part. But what makes those contributions valuable is they're going through a foundation which is making a non-partisan or non-motivated decision about what to do with the money. And I think those are the companies that will be able to stand most proudly and point to how they helped during the outbreak. But leadership, and this also goes back to our governmental leaders, has to do with recognizing the pain and suffering that's going on amongst the employee community. I'm doing everything I can to keep everybody at Earth 911 on staff, even though our revenue is down 50%. And we have been advertising dependent for a long time. Maybe this is our opportunity to break our dependence on advertising too. I don't know, but that's one of the things I'm thinking about. My goal is to keep my people well fed and in their homes. On the other hand, I have to balance the decisions about what I believe the value of keeping them on is, because I run a business and there's a point where I have to, fish or cut bait. I don't want to cut bait. That's what a lot of us are going to face over the course of the next, month or two, when I think this is going to be the most severe, where you will simply have reached the end of the resources that you thought you could get by on, and you're going to have to make hard decisions. And then all sorts of things come into play. Do I need the high-end cable service I have? Do I need the subscription services that I continue to pay for every month for, I subscribe to a sustainably made antiperspirant called Helm, and I get a really cool little refill instead of getting the whole package every month. I'm going to keep that because it's going to continue to be sustainable. But there are a lot of other kinds of subscriptions that I may give up because I no longer have the resources. And the first thing I'm going to do is try to keep my people employed.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really the just such a huge problem. And there was a story along the I just wanted to know if you knew this, but about staying relevant. I think it's Gucci, Prada, and some Italian fashion brands are making like fashionable protective gear for hospitals and nurses and doctors. They're making
That's
masks.
very nice. Is it essential?
Well, the protective gear is essential, and they
The
are
protective
short
gear
on it.
is fashionable protective gear
Well,
necessary?
it's not. It's I'm saying it's fashionable because they're made by Prada and Gucci and.
Granted, but this is like giving away HBO. It's a good, it's helping people stay sane. I'm not knocking
It
them.
doesn't have to be fashionable, but it's
Right,
functional. Has
right.
to be functional.
And if it is functional, it is a good thing to be doing. You're contributing to your community. The question is whether or not you're reinforcing your brand by doing so. And you're talking about them reinforcing their brand. And that is a good thing to do for their business.
Yeah.
It's not wasteful. Does it mean that when we come through this, that Prada is the first thing we're going to go back and spend on? I don't know. I don't know that that's a great use of their money
Yeah.
in a marketing sense, but it's a great use of their money in a public service sense.
Well, see, now I have a little bit of a problem with marketing since I am in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, marketing is always about the numbers. It's always about getting users, getting this, keeping your bottom line in shape. Um, no pun intended. But and that's actually not. Oh, anyway. But it's a business. But how do you put out a good message? Say, Idka, for example, we do a good thing. We provide a service for people that they need right now working from
Mm-hmm.
home,
Mm-hmm.
a simplified way to communicate.
Right.
Easy.
And privacy.
And it's privacy focused. It's built into the system. That's a nice thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go and I say to people, well, I'm sorry about COVID-19, but we're relevant because am I going to look like a jerk?
You very well could look like a jerk unless you provide a specific context in which you're adding value for the people that you're trying to reach.
Right.
And it has to be based on what they really need, not what you think your reputation should be.
Right.
And a lot of the times that's the conflict in marketing all the time, is between customer centricity and organizational centricity. And we're in the midst of a transition driven by digitization, in which customers are better able to judge the full set of benefits and costs of what they do. And companies are going to have to live with the fact that customers are more aware than ever before, that transparency makes them accountable in ways that they have not been in the past, which is probably a good thing for marketers if they embrace the dialogue that requires. And, going all the way back to the Clue Train Manifesto, a great book from, I think it was 1999.
Right.
Markets are conversations, and a conversational environment requires generosity, openness, and tolerance of different opinions, and that's what marketers have to be able to do, is live with other opinions.
Right. And I think, just to add to that, I think the key is also, one of the keys is to get invited to conversations. And not just say, hey, that's really relevant to me, and butt in on when you're not welcome.
Yeah, ask a question and instead of making a statement. That's the easiest way to start this. Hey, customers, what can we do for you now? Exactly. Rather than, hey, we're here to tell you what we can do for you because you didn't know that we could solve your COVID problems.
Right. It's in a way it's intrusive and it's creepy.
Mm-hmm.
But and I had another question that just got fed to me through wonderful technology is, do you think, and I think you touched on this, but do you think we're going to do business differently? Mm-hmm. Is this going to change the way businesses do business?
I think in a couple of ways. One is we are talking a lot about virtual work, but that's confusing the channel that we use and the task that we are performing. We are working differently. And the way that I would phrase this is, or frame this question is, are you remote if there's no central office? Well, we're still all working. Why don't we rethink work?
Yeah.
I believe we're going to. I think commercial real estate is in for a very bad few years because there's going to be a lot fewer people going into offices all the time.
Right.
Coming out of 2 or 3 months of working at home, a lot of folks are going to be going, I like the flexibility. On the other hand, there are a lot of people who can't work at home. And those folks need to be paid, like I was saying earlier, for being out there when there's a risk. Otherwise, they won't be there. And this is the first time I think labor has had a real leverage in this conversation in a long time. And it's because we know without them, nothing happens. And that's never been plainer than before. So I think business is going to change in terms of how work is organized and how it is deployed. And that can include non-symbolic analysts, right? People who do regular everyday work. They may be sales reps representing multiple brands instead of one brand in a local region, so that each of those brands has a physical interface to the local customer. And a metaphor for that is Uber Eats. Uber Eats is the last mile solution for restaurants all over my community to me right now, because I can't go and sit down at the restaurant anymore. Think about that in the context of all the different brand relationships that need to be supported and facilitated by real human beings in local markets. And then the other, in addition to the change in work style, is the change in demonstratively showing the benefits and costs of what you buy or subscribe to in a way that makes people comfortable with their purchase and the impact that purchase has on the planet. And we do know, and it was certainly, Earth Day's 50th anniversary is on April 22nd, just a few days from now. We were on the verge of a climate-oriented election in this country for the first time. And now that may be disrupted, but we are still looking at 10 to 50 years from now, serious weather and sea level consequences from global warming that we're going to face up to. And that is an awareness that consumers and that business are all embracing, and in the process of making a relevant decision point in every purchase decision that won't stop. It has been interrupted by COVID, but it won't stop. And we're going to understand, because we can measure everything so much more completely today, all the impacts and coming to terms with that. And that's really where I think the left, right, and the conservative liberal agenda run into each other. Is there's this idea of that's the way we do things. Well, human society has changed the way it's done things all along. And conservatives were proud of that too, until very recently. Now it seems like we just want to go back. Oh, it was the good old days. Well, no, if you were there, the good old days had a lot of bad components. This may sound trivial, but when I grew up, you couldn't watch television on more than 3 channels, right? Now I have so many choices that there's an actual downside. But because I could go into a world where I never see anything that contradicts my worldview. On the other hand, I now have vast choices. I can see Asian cinema, I can see European cinema, I can watch cricket instead of baseball or football. I can do anything I want with my mind because it's all right there on my screen. Everything is going through that transition because the way, actually, a friend of mine put this nicely the other day. The python of society swallowed the digital tortoise 20 years ago, and there's still this lump of tortoise in the middle of that python that hasn't been digested. This is our opportunity to digest the digital tortoise and become a truly vibrant digital society.
That's a great note and a great image. And unfortunately, we are out of time, which is so sad. But Mitch, I hope you'll come on the show again.
I'm happy to.
Always a pleasure. And thank you so much for your valuable insights, as always.
Well, thank you, Liz. And everybody be safe and be well.
Absolutely. Yeah, to our audience, if you have any questions or comments for myself or Mitch, we'd love to hear from you. You heard where you can reach Mitch. You can find us all on Idka, www.idka.com. Join the open group, What Now, What's Next, and offer your opinions. It's an open dialogue, it's ad free. We're nice people. We're offering support and keeping the dialogue open about what's going on. We're offering also free access, just so you know. So any questions, again, log in and find us there. To keep up to date with us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please stay well, safe out there, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you on the next Good Tech.